Hey, JD here. Welcome to the Mead House. You know, over the past several years, we've brought you over 150 episodes of mead making education, information, and entertainment. More than 100 guests have stopped by the Mead House, professional mead makers, medal-winning home mead makers, competition organizers, experts on yeast and honey, and brewers just like you and me have all visited to share their knowledge. Hey, the Mead House is produced for home mead makers and brewers looking for a bit of inspiration and information from the many guests and discussions we have here at the house. You can help support the Mead House by joining the Mead House Keyholder Club on Patreon. Just go to patreon.com and search for the Mead House. There's also a link in the show notes. For as little as $2 a month, you can become a keyholder. We've teamed up with some great companies to provide thank you gifts for your support. So get on over to Patreon, join the Mead House Keyholder Club, and get your own set of keys to the Mead House. You can listen to the Mead House podcast with your favorite player, and be sure to rate us 5 stars on iTunes or your favorite listening venue. The Mead House, mead making entertainment you just don't want to miss. Hey, welcome to the Mead House, and hey, thanks for listening to episode 190. 10 more to go, guys. We got to come up with something special for show number 200. My God, has it been that long? So the neighbor stopped by with a bag of bones the other day, all excited that he might have found a cache of old dinosaurs, okay? So when I looked in the bag, I said, well, no, those look a lot like the remnants of a goat roast that took place in the neighborhood last week. Hey, anyway, Jeff and Ryan are here. I'm JD Webb. Hey, the Mead House podcast. Check us out on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, Spotify, iHeart. The whole list goes on and on and on. Front page of the website. For your listening venue, make sure you rate us 5 stars on iTunes while you're there. themeadhouse.com. Hey, in this episode, how often have you made a recipe and went to duplicate it according to your notes, but changed one small little thing you thought might make it better, yet introduced a whole new dimension? Hey, we'll talk about that about the one-off batch for a little bit. Also, low ABV meads. Now, we've talked about this briefly on the show periodically, and low ABV meads usually come with some desire for the need to increase the mouthfeel. We've talked about all the different kinds of things you could use. Things like vanilla, coconut, tannins. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. But the right concept might be found somewhere else that we haven't tried yet, and that's in raw ales. And then, of course, in segment 3 of the Social Club, this is where we try to answer questions from mead makers like you and I with no formal expertise other than what we have brewed in our own brew house. But hey, first, all that and more here at the Mead House. Thanks to all the Mead House keyholders who help keep the mead. I need to put this part on a recording too and just kind of play it in there. Hey, keyholders, we really do appreciate you guys sticking with us and helping to support the show. It's only $2 a month or more if you want. And we've even got some pretty cool things we can send out to you as thank you gifts. You can just easily get to us at patreon.com. Just search for the Mead House, or just click on the link in the show notes. They're on every single episode at themeadhouse.com. Thanks a million. We certainly appreciate all of your support over the years, and hope to bring you more better stuff here in the future. Hey, what are we drinking tonight? Well, in my special delivery Sap House box, my quarterly mead box, I got a little something extra. And it's from Hobbs Brewing, a little place down there in Ossipee, New Hampshire. And what I'm drinking, and I'm actually two-fisting it tonight. Please don't tell my cardiologist, he'll get all mad. But I'm double-fisting it tonight. The first one is something from Hobbs Brewing right there in Ossipee, New Hampshire. It's called Wannabe. It's a blonde ale with honey and lemon. We've been on this honey beer thing, talking to some people here recently. Yeah, some great interviews. Go back and check the last couple, two, three. Some great folks that we've had on the show here talking about honey beers and how they've incorporated honey into their brew. Well, old Ash down there at Hobbs Brewing, they're doing kind of the same thing with this wannabe. Now, this is, like I said, a blonde ale with honey and lemon. Now, don't let it fool you. This is not your grandmother's elixir for grandkids with sore throats, okay? It's not that, okay? The lemon is very subtle along with the honey, but it is definitely there. It does have a kind of a sweet backbone to it, but don't let that fool you either. Mm-mm-mm. This is, and we made the comment, I think, in talking to one of these guys here, maybe the last week. We were talking about, or maybe it was the three of us, or the two of us, or the three of us, I don't remember, talking about beers that you can drink pretty much all year round. This is one of those beers, okay? This is a summertime beer as much as every bit a wintertime beer. I dig this stuff. It's very light, very refreshing, clocks in at 5.5%. And, this is one that you just, finish off a six-pack in a night and crawl into bed and not have to worry about it. This is really good stuff, Ash. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much for tossing it in my box. Now, the other one I got, a little birdie told me that there were some deliveries of Blanton's bourbon around town. And so right away, the wife and I jumped in the car and started hitting up all the local places that I know, usually are on the distribution list. And lo and behold, wound up with 4 bottles of Blanton's bourbon. Now, why am I talking about this? Why is this such a big deal? I don't know where you live, but where I live, Blanton's bourbon is probably the most sought-after bourbon ever, okay? It is made in such small batches that most of the time distribution is just 2 bottles per store. Okay, I was lucky to find at a couple of Bevmos that around town here locally. Picked up 4 bottles. I got 7 on the shelf now, 1 open. I got 6 put away. Not only is this the most sought after, but it's the most sought after for another reason. It tastes damn good. This is a damn good bourbon. And if you can get your hands on a bottle, it's going to run you. I started paying about $55 for it a few years back. My recent purchases were up in about the $75 mark. Of course, that's a Bevmo. Now, Bevmo is usually about 15-20% higher than just about everybody else. Might be able to find it cheaper if you shop around and look, but look hard. Distribution was recently. This is like 3 days later. They're probably gone by now. So, when you hear of it going around, if you're interested, you got to jump on it. When you hear distribution, that they've distributed, you need to jump on it because by the end of the day, they're just gone, period. So that's what I'm doing tonight, boys. Jeff, what did you put in your glass tonight?
So I am also drinking something from down South House Way. The frustrating thing about Midwest weather, this time last week when we were recording, I woke up that morning to negative 20 degree temperatures. I thought that was ridiculous.
I recall.
Really. Today around 3-4 o'clock, my temperature gauge outside hit 64. That's a really wide swing for a single week, and it does feel like an early spring here. So I cracked open another pour of this, the Calendula mead that I had a few weeks ago. This is the one with, it's related to marigolds. It's a floral mead. It has kind of a, I would say off dry, maybe even dry finish to it. Very floral. Got some nice, like, acidic, slightly citrusy bite. I'm getting some interesting, almost spicy notes off of it this time. So yeah, no, this just the little dry floral seemed like a great springtime beverage for welcoming some nice weather for a change here. Then in my other glass, I have a tasting room batch from Boulevard. This is their hazy pale ale. I guess they do this in sample cases. They'll give something that they're testing in the brew house, a bottle run, and put like 3 of those in a case. And it's got a good bitter backbone to it. I'm not getting a lot of like the floral or the flavor hops out of it.
But does it taste good?
Oh yeah, it's very tasty, and really hits the spot on a warm day like today.
Sounds good. I got a bottle of that too. I haven't cracked it open yet. I was going to do that tonight, and then I spotted this blonde ale wannabe, and I thought, this kind of fits the, with the discussions we've been having the last couple of weeks. So I just cracked this can open, and of course my blend. So it's fitting. Next week, I promise, Ash, I'll crack that bottle of what'd you call it? Calendula. Yeah. Calendula. I had talked to Ash here about a couple, 2-3 weeks back, and he was telling me about this mead. And I thought, what the hell are you talking about, guy? I have no idea what that is. So he started explaining to me I forgot about half of what he said, but I thought, wow, that sounds really interesting. And sure enough, like your box came into my box too. I just haven't tasted it yet. So I promise I'll do that next week on the show. But Ryan, you've always got something harebrained, interesting, off the wall, something unique and different in your glass. What is it tonight?
Well, there's an old saying that says "trust but verify."
Yeah.
And last night I heard something that I just decided to trust and didn't bother to verify.
Uh-oh.
And it was that yesterday was National Margarita Day.
Oh, no kidding.
And I chose not to verify it because I just felt like a margarita, and I didn't really care to know if it was not true. I was margarita anyway. Mm-hmm. And so made a batch of margarita mix. Very, very simple mix here. It's 1 cup fresh squeezed lime juice. That probably takes you about 5 or 6 limes to get there. 1 cup really good tasting water, good filtered water or good well water, just whatever tastes really good to you. And then a 1/2 cup of orange blossom honey. Mm-hmm. Mix those up together and then take out a glass. Now, I like my margaritas up. JD knows this. Whenever we've gone out, I order them up. But so I make mine in a shaker. But if you like theirs on the rocks, that's fine. Take 2 parts good tequila, 1 part orange liqueur, bitter orange liqueur. I like Grand Marnier. Some people like Cointreau, whatever. Mm-hmm. And about 2 parts of that margarita mix. Some people go to 3. Two's nice. If you're doing it on up like I do, put it in a shaker with some ice. Give it a couple of good shakes, and then strain it into a martini glass, and garnish it with a lime wedge. If you like it on the rocks, you just go right into a rocks glass over ice. And that's it. So I had a couple of those yesterday, and I had a little bit of the mix left over. Typically you can get, probably half a dozen margaritas out of that mix I just described for you there.
Must have been a good day yesterday.
Well, I didn't drink 6. No, I'm just saying you get about 6 out of it. So had a little bit of that left over, and cocktail hour today was the margaritas. And, I mentioned 5 or 6 limes. Now, what I do and is take out your microplane. And before you do anything to those limes, take out your microplane and zest them. Zest every last bit of zest right off those limes. I put mine into a mason jar with a little vodka. And I've also got a little some ginger hanging out in there. And I'm just kind of making a little liqueur, little lime ginger liqueur there. That's gonna go into my ginger lime mead that I'm making here in the next month or so. So don't waste not, want not. Use all that good zest up, and then get the juice out of those limes and everything else. Okay, so a couple of margaritas in tonight, cocktail hour, and now I am drinking one of my infinity meads, one of my infinity spritzers, and we have turned the corner, guys, because one of the bottles that I've been putting into the infinity kind of pretty regularly is gone. Actually, two of the things are gone. So wow. The infinity is really taking a turn. Because I told you guys I had a couple of cases left of sangria mead or infinity mead, and it was kind of a rotator between like 4 bottles. There's 4 different types of bottles that I was just kind of maybe 4, 5, 6, just putting in there. But 2 of them were kind of one-offs, and we'll get to that later. The 4 were pretty regular. I probably had half a case of each of these 4, and I just kind of would rotate whatever was going in there. Well, 2 of the bottles are now completely exhausted, so the infinity is going to take quite a turn after tonight, which I'm excited about. And yeah, just a real nice, interesting flavor here, just to round out the evening as we get into our recording.
Sounds good. By the way, did you crack that bottle of añejo open yet?
I did. That's what was in the margarita.
Oh no, you didn't. You did. You put. Oh my god. I should have ended that conversation. Ryan, I talked to Ryan the other day, and he says, "Hey, have you tried or did you pick up or something? I don't know however you started, but he picked up a bottle of the Kirkland and I think I might have said something about it on the show, but he asked me, have you had that Kirkland Añejo or whatever? And I said, well, yeah, that's like really good. It was surprisingly good. Raven and I were shocked at the flavor of this Añejo tequila from Costco, Kirkland brand. Now I don't know who distilled it for him. I don't know who bottled it for him. I haven't dug into that at all. But I told Ryan, I said, dude, this is like a bourbon. Okay, this drinks like a bourbon. All right, 2 fingers in a little Glencairn glass. Sit by yourself, smell it, sniff it, get the aromas, sip it slowly. And you did what? Put it in a margarita? That's like a sin, guy. That's like a major sin. You know what? You need to go confess next Sunday at church, and tell the Father what you did with that awesome tasting añejo tequila. I can't believe you made a margarita with it.
Well, let's talk about that for a second here. Is that I typically run now in the past. I mean, I've gotten really good. You guys know that I've been. I don't ever want to say I was a hoarder because that sounds really bad, and I've never been a hoarder in any sense of the word. But I've had stockpiles get out of control a little bit.
Stockpile.
And like cases upon dozens of cases of beer and mead and things like that, right?
Yeah.
So I try to run. I've gotten a little more disciplined, and I've tried to run a minimalist type bar. I mean, and a lot of other things too. Like clothes and things like that. Try to be a little more minimalist. So I it's kind of like who was that George Thorogood, that old musician. He goes, I got one bourbon, one scotch, and one beer.
Yeah.
So that's the way I try to I run my home bar. Is that I say, okay, I'm gonna have one bourbon, one scotch, one rum, one gin, one tequila, and kind of go off of that. So I in the past I've had things where you got, I've got a mixing rum, and I've got a mixing bourbon, and I've got a mixing vodka, and I got a mixing gin, and then I've got a sipping bourbon, and a sipping rum, and a sipping gin, and a sipping tequila. So I'm trying to be more minimalistic. So I have one bottle of tequila. One bottle of tequila. It is the Añejo. It's very, very good. Now, here's the other side of the defense of that. The one defense is just saying I'm going to be a minimalist and just have, one bottle of each spirit, and that's what I want to make it a good one. But the other defense is, I was a bartender for a lot of years, and I've heard a lot of people would say stuff like, "Oh, you'd never mix that bourbon or never mix that tequila." That's good. And I'd say back to people, look, whatever you like is what you should drink. If you like putting a really, really expensive tequila in a margarita because you think it you think it tastes good, then do it. If you like drinking Jim Beam on the rocks, fine, go ahead, do it. But so I say, look, it's in the eye of the beholder. I have one bottle of tequila. It's a good bottle of tequila. I think that it tasted great in the margarita, and I wasn't gonna buy the Kirkland Silver just to have a mixing tequila.
Well, actually, the Kirkland Silver isn't all that bad for a mixing, for margaritas. What's even better? It's
kind of our house. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not a bad tequila for margarita. We've used that here. Typically Raven likes the Avion Silver in her tequilas, or the Cazadores Reposado. She really likes that in her margaritas. But the Añejos, no, that's like that's like a cardinal sin around this house to put something like that in a frickin' margarita. You might as well put it in Kool-Aid. Anyway, I just thought so. So okay. So you did you sip it by itself?
I just a taste of it.
Okay. So do you remember anything about it? What you liked about it, or anything, or did you forget?
It says that they age it in a French oak barrel, and it really comes through. I mean, it's really nice. It's almost surprising some of the like notes you get off of that tequila. It's very good, and I think it's great.
But it's when you start getting even some of the reposados, the better reposados, but most of the añejos, of course, extra añejos are very bourbon like, but añejos, I don't want to go through the whole aging thing. I mean, you can Google that and look it all up, but typically añejos are aged in a bourbon barrel, used bourbon barrels. That's where you pick up all that vanilla and caramel. That's like I was telling you the other night. I mean, a lot of things that are similar to drinking bourbon, but instead of the mash bill, the corn and the rye and the other grains that might be used in a bourbon, the backbone is, of course, the agave. And when you get used to the taste of that, you can start picking that out. And sometimes you can even tell how it was cooked, even baked. Tastes a little different than roasted. But I don't want to get into all the tequila and everything. But well, I'm glad.
There's one thing I want to say about this. This is kind of funny. Whenever you see bottles tequila, they kind of put up there, they're 100% blue agave, right? 100% blue agave, and just like you see chicken, and you go to the grocery store, you go to the market, you see chicken, and it says chicken raised without antibiotics.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know how much you guys realize, but people realize, first of all, tequila has to be made with 100% blue agave.
Yeah.
That's what tequila is,
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, and chicken, by the way, in the U.S., it's illegal to raise chicken with antibiotics.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like when you see chicken, a package of chicken out there that says raised without antibiotics, or a bottle of tequila that says 100% blue agave, it's basically just saying, hey, we didn't break the law.
Yeah.
Pat us on the back we're actually putting across the label, across the package, hey guys, props to us, we didn't break the law.
Yeah, I got another chicken story, but we'll save that for another day. It's about the packaging, just like your antibiotic thing. But I'll save that for another show, maybe next week, or maybe on show 200. I don't know. Anyway, so on with the show tonight. And I have done this before. You make a recipe. Maybe you make it a couple of times and you nailed it. Okay, what you got was really good. And you think, well, I'm going to take it up one more notch. I'm going to make it just a little bit better. And you add something or even take away something. Maybe it was too much of one thing, not enough of another. So it's not much, just a little bit. But what you wind up with is something that doesn't even taste like the original recipe. And is that the one-off? It could be. I don't know. But I think there's another dimension here somewhere, and talk to us about that. The one-off.
We started talking about this last week, and we said, hey, let's talk about that, this week. And the way I wanted to approach it, and JD, you've got an interesting take on it, is, a lot of times people will tell you, whether you're making beer or wine or cider or mead or anything else, that, you've got to make repeatable batches. The way you become a good mead maker, the way you become a master at your craft is you make the same batch over and over again. Yeah. You get to know your honey, you get to know your yeast, you get to know your ingredients, and you just, some guys say, hey, they spend years just making one batch of mead over and over again, and then they become, until they can be a master at it. Well, sure, you can do that, but there's a couple of reasons that somebody might not. Like I was kind of mentioning last week, is maybe you get some ingredients that you're never going to be able to replicate. Maybe you've got some. I talked a couple of years ago. I said I got a jar of watermelon honey as a gift. I've never seen it since. Not in part of the country where we see a lot of watermelon honey. Mm-hmm. So you got some watermelon honey. Or maybe you got some Kona beans, coffee beans, or something like that. Or maybe you've got just some really weird ingredients, like fermented green pine cones or something like that. And, you're going to make a batch that off the bat is going to be one-off. You're never going to be able to replicate it. It's just, how do you approach that? The second thing would be maybe you just don't want to make, blackberry mead for the next 6 years, becoming a master at it. Maybe you want to make different varieties. I talked about like the Ryan Braggot, for example. Maybe you want to make it with different yeasts or different malts or different honeys or different hops. And a lot of those just become kind of, one-off batches. I mean, I've done some that I've got some hops, hops around. Oh, okay, I'll use these hops, or I'll use these grains, or I'll use this yeast. Oh, okay. And it's not that I've repeated it before or repeated again. They're just kind of different, slight little variations on what I've done. So it's kind of two different avenues there. One is just when you're deliberately not replicating something because you want to make a small tweak, whether it's just what you have on hand or you want to try something different. Or the second one is if you've got just ingredients that you're not going to be able to source again or find again, and you're doing it kind of almost experimental. And how do you square that with also wanting to be a good mead maker, have good processes, good procedures, and have good consistent products come out.
Yeah.
So that was kind of the basis for where we were going here. Jeff, I know you had a little bit of time to think about this. Where's your head at?
So I've got a couple different angles on this one. The first is an anecdote. One of the, I don't know, I think it was like the 5th or 6th batch I ever made. It might have been a little bit later one, but I made an oaked traditional that we served at my wedding. It turned out very nicely. I had plenty of time to make it happen, and I needed it. I used the Y yeast, sweet mead yeast, and that was the second time I tried it. It was the second time I was incredibly frustrated with it. It seemed to stall repeatedly. Took a lot of coaxing and babying just to keep it moving and keep creating a good product. And then I put oak on it. I put a little too much oak on it, and I tried to save it by putting some gelatin in there, and that toned it down enough to where it was drinkable. And then I find it and let it sit, and it aged out and got very good feedback at the wedding. People were telling me how much they enjoyed it, but I officially decided I was never making that batch again because that was too much effort. There were too many steps to get the result I wanted, and I'm hoping that I never have to go through that many extra steps to get something drinkable or passable, in that to get an end result there. So that's one-off batch, and I may do a riff on that and make another oaked semi-sweet traditional mead in the future, but not going to use the Y yeast sweet mead yeast. I'm probably going to go with something a little bit more what do I want to say, one of my go-tos now, whether it's 71B or I might hit it with a Clyke yeast even. Okay. On the other hand, I think a little bit more towards what Ryan was talking about last week, as far as one-off batches. I've gotten odd ingredients like, 2 years ago, I think we had a bumper crop of mulberries on. It's more of a bush than a tree because it's literally growing into my fence line. But we had almost 10 pounds of those.
Is that a lot? Is 10 pounds a lot? I have no idea what a mulberry even looks like.
It's a lot like a blackberry in color and size.
Oh, okay.
So we got a pretty substantial amount.
Tree.
Yeah.
You got a white mulberry?
Sorry, I mean to cut him off. I have a white mulberry tree in my lawn.
Same thing? Or is it different?
I don't know the difference between like the different colors of mulberry.
Yeah, I don't know if those are different species or like different varietals or how that exactly works.
So you made this mulberry mead.
Mm-hmm. And my wife loved it. She swore up and down it was one of the best things I ever made. And anytime we had friends over, she's like, "Oh, you gotta pour them some of that mulberry mead." And I've tried in vain to make more because we didn't realize 10 pounds was a bumper crop. The tree has been getting bigger and bigger, so less and less is within reach, and in much easier reach of birds. So instead of 9 pounds or so, 9.5 pounds, I think was the final score that year, we ended up with something closer to 3.
And the birds get the rest.
Right. And, I could have made a half gallon or something like that and tried, but it wouldn't have been the same. I've just kind of accepted that was a really good mead. And if I meet somebody with multiple mulberry trees, or if I get a line on some local mulberries when they're in fruiting season and can just shake the living hell out of them, I'll go do that. But that's probably not going to be the regular that I want it to be. And that's fine.
So they don't make like little mulberry picking baskets, like you pick a pear or an apple or anything like. You reach up into the tree,
actually,
strip the thing off full of mulberries.
Actually, the guy that owned the homebrew store that I was working at for a while, he made a mulberry hydromel a couple of times and just harvested from his friend's tree in the yard. And he said the best way to harvest is actually to lay bed sheets under the tree and then just shake the hell out of it.
Oh my God. So that was your,
except, it's like I said, it's more of a bush than a tree, and there's no like big central trunk to shake.
And so that's your one-off. That was your one-off, only because you can't get more mulberries out of the tree.
Not easily. I mean, if I really put a lot of effort into finding people with fruiting mulberries, I could probably probably
I'd go
with enough.
Yeah, I'd go find a neighbor that's got one that's got lower branches somewhere. Ryan, mine was a little bit different take. I was thinking of one-off. I'm thinking, you create this recipe and you do it over and over, and it's good. It's like my sizer, okay? Cider, whatever. I've got a standard recipe I use all the time. Never fail. I never change it. And one year I did change it. I don't remember what I added, but it was terrible. I mean, it just didn't work. I don't remember. I think, actually, I do. I put wood in it. I oaked it. And that was just not the thing to do. It created this whole different flavor. This carbonated, and I've tried to get as close to Magners as I can possibly get, and which is a dry British cider. I mean, I love dry British ciders, and so that's what I was trying to create. And I had gotten to a point where I thought, this is pretty damn close. I love it. My neighbors drink the crap out of it. And so that's what I stuck with. I've got my standard recipe, and I did it year after year after year. And then in one year, I thought, well, just crazy. I've got all this wood here, so I threw some wood in it, left it in there for the 8 months, and the result was not even. I mean, I was really disappointed. Really disappointed. So maybe that was my one-off, huh?
Yeah.
So to speak,
Yeah. I was thinking about this as in two different ways, and they kind of come back to if you've got a really good process, you understand, you understand how to have a clean fermentation.
Yeah.
Then I think you can do one-off batches in either way. I don't think that way ingredients need to scare you. If you get, some watermelon honey or Kona beans or something, some exotic fruit, from some part of the world or something, or a bumper crop of mulberries or something like that, because you're just employing the same procedures, processes that you would have. You know how to your nutrients and degassing and things like that to really just have a clean fermentation. So I don't think if you understand how to do that, you can do it. Now at the other side of making your small batch, so adding oak or adding lemon or adding whatever, like with a Ryan braggot, sure. In the summer, absolutely. You want to make it like a shandy, you want to add some lemon in there, something, go ahead, no problem. It's also just understanding the small bets and understanding sometimes that 1 + 1 = 3. So, if you're saying, oh, I made a Ryan braggot once and I oaked it, and that was really good. Or I made a Ryan braggot once with lemon, and that was really good. Now I'm going to make an oaked lemon Ryan braggot. Well, just understand that sometimes, things have a funny way of 1 + 1 = 3, meaning that, once you put those two things together, and I by the way, this is just an anecdote. I don't actually know if this would happen, but, it could turn into something totally different, like JD was talking about. You think you're just adding a little bit of oak, a little bit of lemon, and you've done oak, you've done lemon, so you think you know what's going to happen, and something different happens, and that's okay. Again, just you're making your small bets, and you're just using your good processes and procedures, and things like that can happen. Now, I've had very happy accidents where things like that have happened and been very good. I'll also be the first to raise my hand and say I've had very, very sad accidents. I tried one. I made a braggot with a buddy one time. We did a collaboration braggot brew, and I thought it was going to be like a really nice Christmas braggot. We had some Christmas spices in there, and we used some really caramelized Belgian candy syrup, and we thought, man, this is going to be great. I had a buddy, drink it, one time, and I wanted someone else's opinion. He's like, "This tastes like fish sauce."
Fish sauce. Make a lobster bisque with it, huh?
Oh, like the Asian fish sauce.
Oh,
put on your. Oh, he's like, oh my god, that was a 1 + 1 = 3 the wrong way.
All right, so low ABV mead. We've talked about this a little bit on the show here and there. We haven't spent I don't think an entire segment on this, and we're talking about mouthfeel here, and we've pretty much run the gamut from top to bottom with all kinds of other things such as vanilla, coconut, tannins, wood. I mean, you name it. Just anything to improve. When I make the Ryan braggot, I get the same problem. I mean, it tastes really good, but it's really flabby thin. Just kind of, it needs something more on the tongue. The flavor is nice. I like the flavor, but it drinks like water. Carbonated water. So how do you get to that mouthfeel? And looking through your notes, now, some of our notes tonight are being borrowed from brewyourown.com, BYO.com. Great article about raw ale. Okay, now I especially want you to mention the angry dogs. I don't know if you saw that in that article or not. Naming how his grandfather used to name all of the angry dogs in the village. But the art of getting the mouthfeel comes a little bit differently than we find in typical ways, Ryan.
Yeah, this is interesting. Where when you're making a raw ale, and if you saw we had two articles that we were kind of looking at, or a few, I should say a few, but two were the most substantial, and there's not a great consensus on what a raw ale is, but it comes up of being it's either never boiled, so there's never a boil, or there's a very, very short boil. So there's a little controversy, kind of a gray area in there. But anyway, regardless of if you never boil or if you just quickly boil, you're not reaching hot break with your wort. which is where a lot of those proteins will convert or in there, and so it a lot more stays in. And I'm saying that wrong. So before we get hate mail, Jeff, jump in and correct me. But essentially, a lot what happens is it a lot. These have a lot more body than your typical traditional style of beer or braggot. In which you're not. You're keeping it. You're gonna have a lot more body. So one of the things here, thinking about this is. This could be a way where you could still make a relatively standard braggot. I mean, my standard braggot comes in about 6%, but instead of being pretty, or you could go lower. I mean, I know people that like it down at like 4%, but without having to, be too thin or flabby thin, as JD would say, because I'm getting about half my gravity points from honey. So if you figure that, I mean, I'm only getting about 3% ABV or 2 to 3% ABV, depending on the strength here, from the malt. And so, this is a way for you to keep more of that body in that braggot without either getting really strong or or staying thin. Yeah. So you're getting a lot of that body there. Now, a lot of people would get scared of not boiling. Well, we're meat makers. We don't care. We're not scared of not boiling. I mean, you can let it hang out at 185, 180, whatever, and feel pretty good that a lot of your especially that a lot of the bugs and stuff have been taken care of. And then, when you get down to, I like to add my honey at about 100, to get right down there, add your honey in or at high krausen, of course. So, but yeah, I want to bring Jeff back in here. Jeff, what do you think about kind of the raw ale method here of creating a more substantial mouthfeel braggot that's getting a substantial amount of its gravity points from honey to maintain mouthfeel?
Well, I think it's an interesting idea. I think it's ultimately going to depend a little bit on, what kind of balance between the malt and the honey you're using. I think if we're talking like 20% of your fermentable sugars are from grain and 80% from honey, that's going to be a much different result than almost a 50-50 or so. And I think in that case, it's probably worth a try. And yes, as I understand it from reading the article, yeah, the idea of not taking it to the full boil and doing the protein break or the hot break that causes all of the proteins to essentially like settle out on the bottom of the water tun, or the boil kettle, I should say, before the bulk of the wort is racked off of it. That's the protein content that is remaining and giving it that extra body. So I think that's probably a valid idea, if nothing else. This is one of those things like, no, we should probably just try this.
How do you get? I'm kind of stuck here a little bit. So, without increasing the malt. I mean, there are other ways. We talked about the other ways. I mean, hops even. I mean, this article that I'm reading even talks about the little tea kettle gizmo thing that his grandfather had set up for doing the hops in it, because they didn't bring it to the boil. So instead of, putting the hops in the boil, they made a tea. Without increasing because we all agree that the malt is what actually adds the honey is not going to do anything but raise the ABV. I think we've already established that. Yeah, and in talking to a lot of these guys, even this honey beer that I'm drinking tonight, Yes, it does add a little bit of flavor. It's there in the aroma for sure. But the mouthfeel. Okay, that's what, to me, that's really important. So how do you get how do you get to that point without adding an incredible amount of more malt?
Well, the idea is in this case, what they're talking about is not bringing it to a boil, but taking it through most of the other steps of, making a beer. So they are still mashing at probably between 145, 155 for hour or so. And they mentioned that, according to USDA guidelines, the milk is considered pasteurized at 145 degrees for 30 minutes.
Right.
So not quite all spoilage bacteria will be taken out by that, but it's more or less pasteurized at that point without going any higher in temperature. In some cases, they may take it a little bit higher to isomerize more of the alpha acids. This is where it gets a little bit more, your mileage may vary. There's a lot of people that do it this way. There's other people that do it that way. So, you could take it up to 185. You could get some isomerization from your alpha acids. You get a lot of extraction from the hops that way, and then let it fall. And you're going to get a very different result than if you just left it at 155 and, threw the hops in towards the end of that and let it cool naturally or something like that. There's apparently a lot of different ways to do this depending on traditional farming standards and ways that people have played with this since then.
Yeah.
Now, I should also mention here that this only works with grain, with your full grain, all grain,
right.
Brewing here.
Right.
Your extract has all, liquid or dry, has already been processed in a way that has settled out those proteins for you. So we're talking about all grain here. So you're starting out with your 2-row or your 6-row or your Maris Otter or your Munich or Vienna or whatever it is that you're using here, and going from there. And so for me, when I do all grain, I do it as a brew in the bag, and I'm going to do this summer. I'm going to try this out this summer, because or even spring here, as though if the weather gets a little bit nicer to sit outside, and do a batch of raw ale, all grain, brew in the bag, and see how that mouthfeel comes out compared to when I would do, like, let's say the Ryan Braggett, just 3 pounds of dry malt extract or liquid malt extract, 3 pounds of honey, and go, or even when I do brew in the bag braggots, but I do usually an hour long boil. And going from there. Now, I'll go back, guys, because I opened the show by saying trust but verify.
Yeah.
Well, there's one thing, again, I trusted but didn't want to verify because I didn't want to waste, was that boiling for an hour will drive away all of the DMS. And DMS in beer is what kind of gives you that cooked corn flavor.
Yeah.
And that
dimethyl sulfide.
Yeah. And so if you boil for an hour, supposedly, and I'm going to say that some of the big brewing authors out there, that we've all heard about, have said things like, if you're, boiling for 1 hour drives away like 99% of the DMS. And I'll boil for a while. Then if I'm doing all grain, I'll boil for an hour, and I can drive all that away. I never really had the desire, and maybe it's on me, of saying I'm not going to do that. I'm going to boil for 5 minutes and just really see if I get DMS, just because I didn't want a big batch that had DMS in it, and I didn't want to do a bunch of really small batches, and just for the sake of, how substantial is the cooked corn flavor in this? I mean, my thought was I just want to make good beer and good braggot, so I just kind of trusted. But in any way, looking at a lot of these raw ale examples, these guys don't have that problem. They don't necessarily say that, hey, you got to really watch out for DMS. And so that was my kind of thought of why, I had kind of always done the big boils. But anyway, getting back to that, I'm going to try it. I'm going to do it. I don't know if I'm even going to reach boiling point. I might just kind of hang it out at 185-ish and kind of do one of those low end here where you don't go all the way and see how it turns out. And we'll just start from that.
Well, part of this article also it talks about just DMS is volatile above 122 degrees. And it says, so what little there will tend to, what little there is will tend to evaporate during the long mash and sparges. The warmer, quicker fermentation will likely scrub out the remaining DMS. So I'm not quite sure that you actually need to boil, to get rid of it. So it may evaporate on its own, provided you've got a nice long mash and sparge correctly. Maybe that's the ideal way. You know what I mean?
Honestly, I'm a mead judge, not a beer judge. Right. I have not memorized the BJCP beer style guidelines, but if I remember correctly, things like Czech lager, Vienna lager, some of these big continental beers, those guidelines allow for a small amount of DMS just as it's considered to style. It's not considered a fault. Mm-hmm. So a little bit isn't necessarily a bad thing. You might find it rounds out the flavor, or it kind of adds something to it. Cooked corn doesn't sound like it would add anything to me, but apparently in some cases it's okay, or it's not considered terrible. Yeah. I probably need to go back to the guides and see exactly how that's defined. But no, I know there are a few different styles that allow for a small amount of DMS.
Well, it's an interesting concept for sure. And, something I was just thinking about. I mean, methodology here. Can methodology have something to do with increasing the mouthfeel? And we're talking specifically braggots here. This is, honey and grain or honey and malt. Something just popped into my head. Now, this may be apples and apples, or it could be apples and oranges, for all I know. But what if you, say you're going to put a 5-gallon batch together, okay? So your first 2.5 gallons is your wort that you cook up. Now, you don't have to bring it to a boil, obviously. We've talked about that. But you sparge your grains, you mashed or whatever, and you've got your malt bill put together. And then you make up 2.5 gallons of your honey and water, for the mead side. And then, one or the other is sitting in your fermenter, and you add one or the other to the fermenter. Now, again, I don't know if we're talking apples and oranges here, whether you're talking about dumping the honey in a high krausen in a wort at that point, or are we talking, this goes back to the judging thing, Jeff. We're always talking about the harmonious blend. I mean, is this the actual blend that they're talking about? Would that increase the mouthfeel? What do you think? Or am I stumping you both?
Well, I guess there's a few different ways to make a braggot. You can mix everything together up front, the honey and the malt, and go from there. You can do it in stages. Like you and I typically prefer to add our honey at high krausen because we believe it gives us a little more
character, honey character,
the honey, yeah. And then you can blend. You can take a beer and take a mead, and you can blend the two together until you get exactly what you want. Now, I don't know if those three. Let's just say you're doing that, right? Like 50% grain, 50% honey, just for the sake of it.
Yeah.
I don't know if you were doing that, if any of those processes would necessarily change the mouthfeel.
Yeah.
If 50% honey, 50% honey mixed up, malt and honey mixed up front, then fermented, 50% of your gravity points for malt, ferment that, and then add the honey, and then ferment, like high horizon.
Well, that's the question.
Or just blending the two together, having a mead and having a beer, then essentially blending to get to the same points and doing it. So I don't know. What I do think about is that having having the malt portion, keeping more of the proteins in that is probably going to help your mouthfeel. I mean, we've talked about maltodextrin, we've talked about lactose, we've talked about other tannins. We've talked about all those types of things, and I think this might be one more tool in the toolbox if you feel like your braggots are a little thin. Yeah. Now, I typically don't feel that way. But some folks might, and this is a tool in their toolbox for them to employ.
Well, I don't know. Sometimes I think methodology could sometimes change the dimensions, change the mouthfeel, change something. I don't know. I've never tried it that way. I just, something popped in my head. I thought, gee, I've never tried that before. So, maybe that's something I put on the bucket list here at Mead House, Southern California. Enough on that. You know what? Interesting article, though. I subscribe, actually, to Brew Your Own. Great magazine. You can get it online. You can, of course, get the, if you get the super subscription, you get them both, magazine and the online. This is a great article, and we'll certainly put I'm going to put the link up in the show notes for those who want to read it. It does talk about raw ale, as, we're talking about beer here. It's an old art form. We're talking, it talks about Middle Ages. It's an old art form here as far as beer making, beer brewing. And there's kind of a funny comment in there about how the grandfather would name off all the angry dogs in the village. I'm just going to leave it at that and let you read the article. Anyway, on with it. We got a ton more. We missed a few last week. We kind of skipped around a little bit because we just ran out of time. Kind of getting that way tonight too. But let's get to the latest ones here, guys. I think I'm starting at the top here, Jeff. This is let's see. Let me read this first. Make sure. A few videos of making cap smells. Okay. This is Crito 279112. Kirito 279112. Hello, R Mead. I'm relatively new to brewing and mead making. I've seen a few videos on making capsamels. Capsamels. Those are those meads that are made with peppers. And recently, someone who enjoys spicy things, I'd give it a try myself. I've been playing around with the idea of a blackberry and sweet corn capsamel using dried habanero peppers, whatever the combination. As of right now, my recipe that I've developed is as follows. Primary fermentation, target starting at 1105, 3 pounds of honey, 3 dried habanero peppers. That's actually quite a lot. Soaked twice in vodka for 24 hours at a time. QA 23 Lauven yeast. Something might not be a bad choice. Fill 1 gallon of spring water. Secondary fermentation. Here's Ryan's thing. Secondary fermentation again. 1 pound of blackberry puree. I'll talk about that in a minute. 1 pound of sweet corn roasted and pureed. I kind of like that idea. Rack from primary into secondary. Let it clear, stabilize, back sweeten with 0.25 pounds of honey. I wouldn't put a number there. That's kind of a taste as you go thing. Thanks for the feedback and anything you can provide. So, okay, so my deal about the blackberry puree, just don't. Okay, use juice. Use blackberry juice. Okay, because you're going to be extremely disappointed when you dump that 1 pound of blackberry puree in there, and it's all going to settle to the bottom, and you're going to wind up with about 2 cups of mead. Clear enough mead that you might consider drinkable. So that's the comment I'll make about.
Honestly.
Yeah, go ahead.
Honestly, I think the black puree is not as bad as the sweet corn roasted and pureed. I think that sweet corn is going to make way more mess with the blackberries, man.
It could.
I mean,
take it from there,
your
Jeff.
single 12-ounce bottle after all that puree has soaked up all the gallons.
With the habaneros. With the habaneros. Okay. So take it from there. You talk about this. What are we doing here?
Okay. Well, I'm kind of with him here on a few different fronts. I have some questions though, and first and foremost, maybe JD, you can shed some light on this. What kind of flavors are we looking for with sweet corn? Because weren't we just talking about cooked corn flavors in beverages?
Yeah, you're going to get, so sweet corn. I mean, just cook up some sweet corn. Don't butter it. Shove it in your pie hole and chew on it. That's the flavor you're going to get. Okay. Fermentation process is going to cook all the sugar out of it. We know that. What's left over is going to be a vegetable flavor that you probably won't like after that point. Cooked corn by itself, even roasted, tastes damn good. But fermented, not quite so sure about that.
Yeah, I'm once the sugar is gone, I'm not sure I would be crazy about that.
Yeah.
I know people put corn in, a mash to make whiskey, and it probably adds some flavors to that.
Yeah, that's a little different process than fermenting out a beer or a mead, I think. So
right.
Yeah.
I mean, I would think that corn as an alcohol would have been a more popular thing if it was, and granted, in pre-prohibition days, apparently there were lagers where 30-40% of the malt bill was corn. So but I'm not, part of me goes, okay, blackberry, habanero, honey, why corn?
Yeah, that's
the first answer I want.
Yeah.
Looking a little bit further, he's talking about using habanero that's been soaked twice over in vodka for 24 hours at a time. I feel like you're better off putting the first batch of vodka in there than the habanero itself at that point.
Yeah.
That's going to get so much of the flavor out of it.
Yeah.
A real quick dunk in the vodka to get all the surface area saturated, probably more than you need. That's more than I have done, honestly, for the couple of times that I've made stuff with hot pepper in it.
Yeah.
And everything turned out fine. Honestly, when you're getting to the secondary fermentation, there's a good calling started and there's a substantial amount of alcohol. I'm not as worried about the possibility of stuff getting in there. You've got a small chance for spoilage bacteria like lactobacillus or something like that, but honestly, not that great.
Yeah. I would leave the corn out of it. Just don't do the corn. I would not do that because I think what you're going to wind up with, the sugars are going to come out of it. You might get a little bit of flavor out of it, but you're going to be left with this vegetal flavor that you're not going to like. Okay. I would stay with the habaneros and the blackberry. Don't use the puree, use a juice, blackberry juice.
Yep.
Or, if you got a big enough vessel, I mean, it sounds like he's doing a gallon here.
Right.
If you had a big enough vessel, throw some frozen blackberries in that are usually pretty damn ripe at that point, or if you get your hands on some really ripe ones. But I would use the juice and just stick with that.
If you've got to go whole fruit and you want to make a gallon batch, you can go to Lowe's and buy a 2-gallon food safe bucket and go over to their hardware aisle with your airlock and find the insertable rubber grommet to put on top of that. You can drill out a hole, put a grommet in it, less than $10, and you fill that up to about 1.5 gallons with blackberries, and you're going to get around 1 gallon for secondary or whatever, for bottling.
Yeah.
As a result. So that's how I would approach small batch.
I think that's a better plan. Ryan, this is from Freedy on micro meads and brews, sizer family. What you go to yeast for sizers when ambient fermentation? I'm going to let you handle this. I've said enough about mine. What you go to yeast for sizers when ambient fermentation temps are low, 62 degrees Fahrenheit. What I have, EC 1118, KV 1116, QA23, D47, 71B, and a couple of others that won't ferment well at temps that low. Leaning towards the KV, but not sure. Wanting to start a basic 5-gallon sizer possibly tomorrow, Monday, if I have the right yeast on hand. 4 gallons of apple juice, 13 pounds of wildflower honey, 3 cinnamon sticks into primary. I can kind of dig that. Possibly step feeding with Possibly step feeding with brown sugar to get alcohol tolerance of yeast. Could work. Going to play with adjuncts in secondary, Ryan. Talk about his sizer going here.
So 1118, 1116, QA23, D47, and 71B. The band is all together, aren't they, guys?
Mm-hmm.
71B and 1116, I've had success both playing with the low temperatures. So, I mean, you're saying 62 degrees. I know it might be a little on the low side for some of those, but I don't think you're going to have too much trouble with them. The other thing is when I'm doing sizers, I'll go 1116, I'll go 71B. I've even done a D47 or 118. Frankly, any of these. I've actually done a sizer with all of these except for QA23. I've done 1118, I've done 1116, I've done D47, I've done 71B. QA23 I have not. But I'm pretty sure you could be okay at those temperatures for the most part. Now, the other side of it is if you wanted to go with a beer yeast, you can do that. You can get in there with the beer yeast and do that. I'll tell you that kind of the way you're talking here about the 13 pounds of honey and everything else, the 1118, I know it's not trendy to talk about anymore, but damn it all, it's the hell with trends. The 1118 at a low temperature is going to be just fine for you. I mean, frankly, it's going to be fine. It's going to gobble up all those sugars, and it's going to, especially because you say that you want to play with adjuncts in secondary, it's going to give you a pretty clean palate. It's going to go pretty clean at the lower end of the temperature range, and you're going to be able to decide which direction you want to go with it. With that being said, my question is, if you want to play with them in secondary, why are you adding the 3 cinnamon sticks in primary? Let's just think about that for a minute here. I mean, if you want to go with a nice clean sizer coming out of it, a blank palate, maybe you want to do what I used to do and, break that off into like 1 gallon batches and do different things in each of them. Do that. But I don't know. I don't know about it unless cinnamon is something you want throughout all of it, and then I guess go for it. But JD, we know what you think about Sizer. What? How about you, Jeff?
So, yeah, of the options given there, the one that I am probably the biggest fan of, I would say, is the K1V 1116. I think it ferments clean. It seems to be a workhorse that just starts and keeps going really well at pretty much any temperature you throw it at. And again, since she was saying she wants to play with adjuncts in secondary, a clean ferment is a way to do it. I too question why to throw a cinnamon stick in primary. I wonder if that's like some kind of an idea of like a sacrificial tannins kind of a thing. Like, you mentioned a while back putting oak in primary for that kind of a purpose, but I'm not sure that's the best way to go about it. This is raw speculation on my part.
Maybe it's nutrients like raisins.
Cinnamon sticks in primary to me is like burning the bottom of your oatmeal. It just ruins the whole batch.
Yeah. The other thing I'll say is that I would also make a strong case for D47 for a couple of reasons. For one, if we're pushing alcohol tolerance on something, you're going to get more apple flavor from a 14% ABV sizer than you're going to get from an 18% ABV sizer.
I agree.
The ethyl alcohol will start to take over. Apple can be a delicate flavor in some cases, especially like 3 or 4 months in when it's just not as present as it otherwise would be.
Yeah.
So D47, which tops out at about 14%, is not a terrible choice. That's the same range that, if I'm not mistaken, 71B, QA23, a lot of those guys kind of all peter out around 14%. The reason I would advocate for D47 is that there are a number of esters thrown by D47 that are qualitatively said to be green apple-like. And I think that would add a level of crispness and dryness, or the perception of those characteristics, to a cider, which could be nice.
Yeah. Yeah, and do the cinnamon and all your adjuncts. Do all that in secondary.
That's what I would do.
Yeah, I mean, when you start putting things in primary, like I said, it's kind of like burning the bottom of your oatmeal pan. I mean, it's going to ruin the whole batch. I mean, once you put it in, you can't take it out, type of thing. So that's the reason why I put everything in secondary. The next one up, guys, Jeff, this one's, I don't know if this guy's name is M-Soli, M-S-O-L-E, something or other. I love these guys are all on Reddit. I love these guys. Where do they come up with these names? I'm going to have to make up one for me. Help with inspiration to flavor mead after fermenting and stabilizing. So my mead currently... Okay, so my mead is currently cold crashing. I bottled a little test bottle and crashed it in the fridge. I'm now tasting it, and to me, it lacks flavor of any kind. It tastes like a thin, dry white wine. Did we cover this one already, or no?
If we haven't covered this exact one, we have covered this topic before.
Yeah, thin, dry white wine. Recipe was 7.5 kilograms of wildflower honey, 2 liters of pure apple juice, and water, 23 liters on the bucket. Stabilized it with the intent of adding more honey for sweetness. Was also considering adding some more apple juice to it. That's a good plan. Do you guys have any idea what to do at this point? Ryan, I bet you got all kinds of ideas what to do with this.
Well, I've had meads come out that, so way back, that did come out like too dry. You know, I'd say when I say too dry, I mean, you know, they just lack flavor. They're you know, like white wine-ish, that kind of thing. There's a few things you can do with that now. Number one is nothing, just age, and age on those does do some really, really interesting things. I mean, we talk about sometimes, when I say we, let's just say the mead community. The mead community does talk sometimes about how to speed up your mead making. I remember when I started making mead and I was talking to some of these good mead makers, there was one guy who said, whenever I make a batch of mead, I hide it on my wine rack. Like, I don't just put it all in one spot. Like, I hide the bottles in the wine rack because, you know, I try to drink them. But if you can keep them around till that second year is when they really just develop into something, you know, really extraordinary. You know, and okay, maybe you don't need to wait 2 years. In fact, I know you don't need to wait 2 years, but you know, going the other direction too and saying, hey, I've got a, you know, 6-minute mead recipe. You know, kind of you lose some of that the I don't know, je ne sais quoi of some of, you know, the mead that we used to have a little bit. So, okay, you can do a lot. Aging is the simplest thing. If it's good, if it's clean, if it doesn't have anything wrong with it, you know, age it for a little bit. You know, get some age on it. It'll be interesting. Kind of like your Sizers, JD. The other things, of course, you can do. You can add oak. You can back sweeten. You can add adjuncts. I mean, if you've got a fairly clean palate, which, if I heard you right, JD, it sounds like he's kind of saying he does have a clean palate. Then your imagination is the only limit of where you can go from there.
Yeah. I'm going to skip all the way down, guys, quite a ways. I'm going to go down here to Pepe Trump 2016. You think you voted for Trump in 2016, Pepe? Did you? What's the key to making a... What's the key? I'm going to try to tackle this a little bit. What's the key to making a very high ABV, 21% or higher mead? So far, the recipes I've seen have the highest target ABV, have staggered yeast nutrient additions. Are yeast nutrients a key to making the boozier meads? Yes. Or are there other methods? Adding yeast nutrient makes sense because it gives the yeast more to break down. But is there more to it? Yes. Asking for a friend, just want to make some strong stuff. Okay, so here's my take. All right, this goes back to the 2 batches of the port mead that I made. It's very difficult. Okay, 21%. I mean, Jeff, you might be closer to this than me, but I think the only way to get to 21% is to actually add alcohol. Okay, and you know what I mean?
Actually what I was going to suggest.
Yeah, I mean, I got close. I got, you know, approaching 19%. It doesn't taste like it. There's no burn to speak of. But I guarantee you 1 little 4-ounce pour of it, and you'll be feeling a little bit woozy in the top of the forehead. I wouldn't get up from a chair real quick. But here's the deal, okay? The nutrients is a must, okay? That's a given. Anytime you're working with honey, because there are no nutrients in honey, okay? Very little, if any. So, yes, nutrients is a big thing. But in my 2 projects, the key to taking the ABV up is very laborious. It is intense. It is mind-boggling. It is not easily done, and temperature control means everything. Okay, you're trying to coax a yeast beyond its stated tolerance level. Okay, in my case, I was looking for something around 19, 18, 19, 20%. All right, the highest I could go was almost 19. One of them is 19, the other one's like 18.5. And that's as far as I could go with it, okay? Now, how to get to 21%? In both of the cases of my two projects, okay, not that this added any more ABV to speak of, but you can also fortify your mead with other alcohols, okay? Wines, cognacs, brandies, that sort of thing. In both of my projects, one project, now I don't have my notes in front of me, but one project has an entire 750 milliliter bottle of cognac. The other one has an entire bottle of brandy in it. Okay, adds a ton of flavor. Okay, lots of flavor came out of it. Did it increase the ABV much? Yeah, maybe 0.3%. Okay, 0.4%, if that. Not much. But the art of coaxing yeast beyond its capabilities is the trick, okay? And that came from not just step feeding the nutrient, but step feeding the sugar. In my case, 13 pounds of honey. And that came very, like I said, it was very intense, very laborious. You have to be on top of your hydrometer. You have to take measurements almost to the hour, hourly. I mean, it's a constant measurement of where you're at, at that time. And, adding the honey back in little pieces at a time, keeping it stirred up, but not so much as introducing oxygen. Once you go through the degassing stage, then the stirring is very gentle. And all you're trying to do is keep that yeast, just keep that stuff floating around, and keep munching on that honey. And it's very laborious, like I said. So 21%, Jeff, I don't think there's a yeast out there that can do it. Do you think there is?
I've been told that distilleries yeasts can hit those kind of numbers within a few days. You don't want to do that. That's going to throw a lot of side flavors and stuff that distillation would drive off, but you're not going to drive off just sitting in a fermenter or going into a bottle. More to the point, that kind of brings up what I want to talk about, which is, if you're going to make a high ABV mead, you still want to go down the road of good nutrition, step feeding the nutrients, degassing, stirring it up, step feeding the honey, really being a good yeast farmer and treating the yeast, keeping them happy. Because the reason I'm going to posit that JD's his high ABV meads don't have a perceptual burn to them despite being high alcohol is because they're predominantly, if not almost entirely, ethyl alcohol, and the kind of the fusels that can be thrown by stressed ferment or things that a lack of nutrient, whatever causes all that, they're absent because he took that amount of time to baby it and really keep the yeast going, keep it happy, and keep it churning at just the right rate. The perceptual threshold for fusel alcohols, those heavy alcohols, the stuff that makes cheap alcohol burn when you drink it, is so much lower than ethyl alcohol. Like on order of, I think, 100 parts per million less. So it's really easy to taste a very small amount of fusel if it's in the mix, versus it's kind of hard to detect even a large amount of ethyl if it's been made properly. So even if you're going the route of pumping it with brandy or cognac, or hell, just if you just want the alcohol without a lot of flavor, go get the Kirkland French vodka. It has no flavor and it's 40% ABV and it's dirt cheap. And pump it up with that. Because I've had a number of people that, they want to make high ABV meads, and to do that, they do ridiculous stuff like fermented at 75, 80 degrees, which, you will get more alcohol that way, but it's going to taste like ass.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, this was, these two projects were, I didn't start the second one until I had a full understanding of the first one. And once I had that, I knew what I needed to do, and you need to make the time to spend with it. If you don't have the time to spend with it, don't do it. And then the last comment I'll make about the cognac and the brandy, it was more for flavoring than anything. Okay, rather than try to introduce oxygen and control that to get that cognac-like flavors in, like they do, like they make port meads. It's just easier just to dump a bottle in and do it that way. I mean, that's not the correct way to do it, but it's the easy way to do it to accomplish what I was looking for, and I made a couple of really tasty batches. That's the bottom line right there. So good stuff. We're going to leave it right there for this episode. Wow, it seems like it went by really quick for some reason. And we're even about a minute over time, but that's okay. We love hanging out here with all of our folks out there in Mead House land. But hey, thanks for hanging out with us in this episode, and a big thank you for spending some time with us here. But hey, you know what? You need to let us know what you're brewing. It's real simple. You can email us info@themeadhouse.com, or you can just send us a message on that old Facebook deal or Twitter, both at the Mead House. But hey, in the meantime, happy mead making. That's going to be it for this episode. Ryan, we need to get a remote control for the lights. Jeff, you just got to keep slamming that door shut. Hey, we'll be back next week with episode number 191 of the Mead House, and we are gone.